Hello everyone, and welcome back to Instant Release. Today we are talking about the Fujifilm X-Pro2, which I talked about in my last video about the X100. I'm not sure this is a review because I only had the camera for about 2 months now, and I've been shooting with it, but I cannot really say that this video is going to be a full review. But at the same time, I'm not sure I'm going to make another review about the X-Pro2. So you know what? I'm just gonna go kind of off script here, and we'll figure things out as long as we go. Okay. The reason why I got an X-Pro2 was I think I explained that a little bit at the end of the last video, but basically, I was using a Fujifilm X-T2. I had that camera for about 3 years, and basically at the end of my ownership of it, I wasn't using that camera anymore. And the reason for that is because I have Nikon Z6 now, so every time I wanted to grab a camera that is a little bit more efficient in a way, that you have a large EVF, you have nice controls all around, good ergonomics and all of that, the Z6 is the better camera than compared to the X-T2 for me in every situation. So I was getting the Z6 in my hands rather than the X-T2 100% of the time, and the result was that the X-T2 stayed on the shelf for the better part of 2024, and that doesn't sit well with me. So I was wondering of a way, either by selling it or replacing it by something else that would make me use that camera again, or that would free space on the shelf, right? So I checked about options and checked about what things made me happy when it comes to photography. And as you saw in the last video, early 2024 I got a Fujifilm X100S, which I absolutely love using for various reasons, but the optical viewfinder is a big one. And I was aware that the Fujifilm X-Pro2 existed, and the X-Pro2 is basically an X-T2, but in a different form factor and with an OVF. So I said to myself, you know what, why not? If it's just an X-T2 with the X100S viewfinder, I'm fine with it. So I bought one, and I have thoughts. So I'm gonna start by saying a very obvious statement. The X-Pro2 is not a good value. It's not a good value camera at all. If you are shopping for a Fujifilm camera and you want to have the best bang for buck, no X-Pro camera should be in your watch list at all. Let's take the example of the X-Pro2 compared to the X-T2. Technically, those two cameras should be very similar. They both are high-end cameras, they both have the same sensor, same processor, technically the same autofocus system, they both have 2 card slots, they are both weather sealed, they both have the same kind of viewfinder, they have the same amount of buttons on them. They should be very similar cameras in 2 different form factors. But the reality is that the X-T2 is better than the X-Pro2 in every single way. The card slots are better. You have 2 UHS-2 card slots on the X-T2 compared to 1 UHS-2 and 1 UHS-1 on the X-Pro2. So that's more of a hardware difference. But the viewfinder is bigger, the video is much better on the X-T2. You have access to a vertical grip, which allows you to record for 30 minutes instead of just 10 minutes on the X-Pro2 or the X-T2 without the grip. It gives you access to a headphone jack, and the X-T2 also have a 3.5mm microphone jack, which the X-Pro2 does not. It has access to the custom autofocus continuous settings, which the X-Pro2 doesn't, which you need those settings if you want to explore the absolute best of the camera. And there are a lot of other firmware quirks, like the fact that you cannot repurpose some buttons on the X-Pro2, but you can on the X-T2. You can do back button focusing on the X-T2, you cannot on the X-Pro2. Lots of little things like that makes the X-Pro2 an obvious worse value, even if both cameras were sold at the same price. And the fact of the matter is, they are not sold at the same price. The X-Pro2 is sold at a significant premium over the X-T2. Right now, if you go on a used camera website like MPB, you could get an X-T2 for about 500 bucks. If you want to get an X-Pro2, you are looking at a price of about 1,000. So that's a huge difference, of course, even for two cameras that would have the exact same performance, but that's not even the case. So that's really something that should be taken into account when we are talking about the X-Pro2. This is not a camera made to be a good value, and it is not a good value. So that's something that's clearly going to hurt the X-Pro2, and I was curious, when I dropped the money. I got mine for 780 bucks locally, didn't go through MPB or something like that. I'm pretty happy with the price, but at 780 bucks, that's still the most expensive camera I've ever owned. So I was really curious to know what makes the X-Pro2 that expensive, and I think I got the answer. So when I got the X-Pro2, my expectations were to be, okay, it's an X100 with interchangeable lenses, and that's about it. Actually, the reality of things is a bit more difficult than this. The X100, you have a camera that is good when it comes to everyday carry. You have decent image quality. You have an autofocus lens that is fixed. You cannot remove it, but it's a small lens, so it's all right. Things like manual focusing, forget about it. Things like great OVF experience with manual focusing, since you don't have access to good manual focusing, you forget about it altogether. That's all. The manual focusing thing in the OVF is something that I wanted to have, and a camera like an X-Pro1, for example, cannot do this because the viewfinder in the X-Pro2 introduced something. You have a little bit of a little patch that comes up at the bottom right of your OVF, which allows you to have a little bit of screen, and that allows you to get a readout of the sensor directly when you're using the OVF. And Fujifilm calls that the electronic rangefinder, and this is the feature that makes me think that the X-Pro2 is competing in a completely different category than just, within Fujifilm, it's an X100 with an interchangeable lens mount. That's not just that. And to me, the X-Pro2 does not compete only with Fujifilm products, it also competes with other niche products like Leica M rangefinder bodies. And before you get out the pitchforks because you are a Leica purist, let me explain my thinking about this. To me, the reason that you would want to get a Leica M camera is because you want to have that corner OVF experience, but you still want to be able to do good manual focusing with that. What I mean by that is that you want to have a smaller camera, you want to have small manual focus lenses, and you want to be able to focus those lenses manually through the OVF, and that's what a rangefinder is. That's what it's useful for. If you wanted just to have something to take photos, just get a camera with autofocus. That's basically it. And the X-Pro2 allows you to do that with that little patch that they call the electronic rangefinder, and that allows me, as a camera user, to use like small manual focus lenses like this one. And I don't know if the camera can focus on that. This is a 7-Artisan 25mm f1.8. This is a lens that I've had for almost 4 years now, and it is a very good lens, very cheap. I like that lens a lot, and on the X-Pro2 I think it's really at home when it comes to the form factor and the look. And this is a lens that I could not focus on something like an X-Pro1, for example, in the OVF. I would need the EVF for that, but the X-Pro2 fixes that problem. And that really helped me, in appreciating what the X-Pro2 is, being able to focus those manual focus lenses in the OVF and not having to use another screen in my life, That's something that has been really, really cool, I think. And to me, the X-Pro2 is a bit of an in-between between a standard mirrorless camera and a Leica M rangefinder. The Leica M cameras come with a lot of compromises that not everybody wants to make. Typically, we are talking a lot about viewfinders and electronic viewfinders and all of that, but even if you don't care about electronic viewfinders, there are a lot of things that Leica M bodies do that not a lot of people are okay with, And me specifically, I'm not always okay with that either. So typically, the complete lack of autofocus is not something I'm okay with, especially when those cameras are extremely expensive as they are. With the X-Pro2, if I want to have autofocus, I just have to remove my manual lens and I just have to put an autofocus lens instead. And I have autofocus again. And I don't have to worry about, oh, but maybe I need an adapter or a different camera system to use autofocus with that thing. Nah, just use an autofocus lens on a camera that supports autofocus and that's it. Also, if I want to have an EVF, it's just a flick of a switch away. It's not completely removed from the camera, and I know this is what Leica M bodies are about, and I'm not saying that Leica M bodies should not be bought, but I'm just saying they are radical solutions to a problem that existed in the 1950s that does not exist today, but they are still radical cameras, right? They do not allow, for adapting lenses, otherwise the rangefinder doesn't work. They are stripped of a lot of electronics that you would expect to see in modern mirrorless cameras. So to me, the X Pro line of cameras is really a bridge between a Leica M body, user experience, and a regular mirrorless. And the strength of the X Pro to me, and what makes me like the X-Pro2 so much, is that with just a couple of buttons and by switching lenses, I can go from a modern mirrorless camera with an EVF and autofocus and continuous focus, tracking autofocus, all of that jazz, to a camera that has basically a very similar experience to the Leica M cameras with an OVF, with the ability to focus manually my lenses in the OVF and not have to look at another screen or anything like that. And one thing I wanted to talk about with the X-Pro2 is that to me, if you just choose to use that camera in the way that you would a Leica M body, the X-Pro2 also brings a number of advantages that the Leica M body simply would not have. Typically, the X-Pro2, that's also the case of the X-Pro1, but the X-Pro1 doesn't have the ability to focus manual lenses in the OVF, so, take that with a grain of salt. And the X-Pro3 doesn't have that feature at all, so it really only leaves the X-Pro2 that has that. The X-Pro2 has the ability to change the magnification of the OVF. You can go from a view that covers the 18mm frame lines to a view that is more akin to 35mm. So if I compare that to the X100 series, the X100, for example, has a bit brighter and bigger OVF, but the drawback is that you only have a single magnification and it's only made for 23mm. So if you put that viewfinder and put it in a camera that has interchangeable lenses like the X-Pro3, the X-Pro3 has the viewfinder of the X100V, for example. It's the same exact unit, same exact optics, and you see it in, when you use the camera, it's optimized for 23mm lenses. You are going to have some trouble if you want to use wider lenses. Typically, an 18mm lens would still kind of work with the X-Pro3. You have the outline of the viewfinder itself that would kind of do 18mm. But if you use like a 12mm lens or a 14mm lens, that doesn't work. On the X-Pro2, you can have your frame lines that, that adjust with the focusing with an 18mm lens because it supports that focal length natively with the dual magnification stuff. And if you want to, do the kind of outer frame lines of the actual OVF to have wider lenses, it can go down to 14mm lenses, which is quite a bit more versatile. And when it comes to longer lenses, so 35mm and above, you have another magnification setting which allows you to have a much larger view of lenses like 50mm, which would be in a 75mm. So that's one advantage that the Fujifilm X-Pro2 has compared to a Leica M camera, which generally doesn't have that dual magnification system. It's not generally, none of the Leica M bodies do that. And I've seen this, especially on DP Review on YouTube, that's a common complaint of these cameras. And I guess the X-Pro found a solution, but not a lot of people really value that because a lot of people don't care about the OVF on the X-Pro and use the EVF anyway. I mean, I find like a bit silly. If you want to have an EVF, just get a camera with an EVF. But I'm not going to judge people for what they choose for their cameras. One last thing where the X-Pro to me has a better, approach than Leica M bodies, and covers, like, fixes a limitation that those bodies have. Is, for example, if you want to adapt lenses that are not made for the system. Typically, one of the lenses I've been using the most with my X-Pro2 in the last couple of months is this one. If I can remove the lens cap. This is a Nikon 50mm 1.8. This is a new version that I got, I think it's from the 90s. And at the back of it you have a Nikon f2 Fuji X adapter. This lens is not made for Fujifilm cameras, and if we were with a Leica M body, I could adapt that lens to the Leica M camera, but it would not engage the rangefinder, and I would not be able to use the OVF. I would have to use the back screen or use zone focusing with the distance markings, and that's the only way I would be able to be focusing that lens accurately if I'm using the screen, or semi-accurately if I'm using the distance markings. But I would not be able to use the viewfinder for that, which is kind of a bit of a problem. On the X-Pro2, I can just screw that lens on, and with the rangefinder patch, electronic rangefinder patch at the bottom right of the OVF, I would be able to focus that lens accurately in my OVF without any problem, without any issues, and the lens works fine, and it's been one of my favorite lenses to use on that system. So, it's yet another advantage, and I understand that not everybody will care about this, but to me it's a pretty big deal actually, and that's what makes me shoot the X-Pro2 so much. It's basically the only camera I've used in the last 2 months. I've used the XZ6 a couple of times, but mostly for telephoto work than anything else. So yeah, that's about all I have to say about the X-Pro2. The last thing that I would say is obviously the fact that you have an EVF at the flick of a switch. So that came in particularly handy for when I'm shooting in the sun. Typically, if you have a rangefinder camera, if you shoot in the sun and the sun gets into the viewfinder, there are high chances that you will not be able to see the rangefinder patch correctly, and that you will have a bit of a problem to see the scene in front of you, because it's just blinding. It's a big light source coming right at you. Sometimes there is flaring in there as well, and with the X-Pro2 I just have to flick a switch and I have an EVF and I can correct my exposure in there, and I'm not blinded by the sun anymore, and I find that to be a pretty nice advantage too. So that's about it when it comes to the X-Pro2. It's not as good as the X-T2 in any way when it comes to specs, but when it comes to enjoyment and the experience I get out of it, I'm not going to justify the prices, but I say I get it. I'm really happy to have paid 780 euros for that camera, even though it's the most expensive camera I've ever bought. It's more expensive than my Z6, which is still kind of a weird thing to say, because the Z6 has been kind of a dream camera to me. And yeah, it's a specialty camera. It's a weird camera for sure. The sensor works great, and I know that the Leica purists will say, "Oh, but it's an APS-C camera. Why would I go with an APS-C camera?" And I can understand that argument, but I think it's a bit of an overused thing to knock Fujifilm cameras. APS-C sensors are much more than good enough. You just have to adapt your focal length to the sensor size. That's the only drawback that you have. I never felt like the dynamic range was not good enough. I never felt like the resolution was not good enough. Those 24 megapixel APS-C sensors without AF filters on them are able to resolve incredibly good amount of detail, so it never was a problem to me. Of course, there are some drawbacks and compromises with the way that the camera functions, the way that the camera handles, but I mean, there are going to be compromises with every camera, and it's either a matter of can you deal with them or can you not. And so far, for the experience of the X-Pro2, I'm more than able to put up with these compromises. So this is definitely not a buy that I regret, and that allowed me to turn a camera that I wasn't using anymore, which was my X-T2, into a camera that now I use. So I got rid of the X-T2, I got rid of the lens, and basically selling my X-T2 and a lens to get the X-Pro2. That cost me about $70. I'm fine with this, more than fine with this actually. And so I don't have a lot more to say about the X-Pro2 itself, because I think it's a camera that has been discussed to death, and I don't want to take part of the discourse of this is the best Fujifilm camera ever, this is blah blah blah. This is not something that I want to say. I also don't want to compare the X-Pro2 too much with the X-Pro3. I have my opinions on the X-Pro3. I'm not the biggest fan of the X-Pro3, but I don't want to be the guy that comes knocking on the X-Pro3 to say, oh yeah, but the X-Pro2 is better or whatever. There are two different cameras. They are making choices which I'm not always in line with. There are things that are way better on the X-Pro3 that I love that would be in the X-Pro2, and things that are on the X-Pro2 that I would prefer to be in the X-Pro3. They are what they are, and I'm not going to say that one is better than the other. I'm just going to say that, in my opinion, if you want the ultimate Fujifilm experience, the X-Pro2 is basically as good as it gets, and that even though this is as good as it gets for Fujifilm, it's still not a good value camera. I think I've said that like 3 times in this video right now, but yeah, this is a camera that is made really for the people that are passionate about this kind of shooting, passionate about this kind of form factor, and are not, turned off or turned down by the few drawbacks that this camera could have. Typically, the viewfinder is not particularly big, the autofocus is not particularly accurate, the video is not really worth mentioning, even though the X-Trans3 can put out exceptional video. It's not a camera made for the sports photographer or the wildlife photographer. It's a camera that is made for the guy that wants to do like nice street photography, document everyday life. This is the kind of thing that I would imagine an X-Pro2 shooter to do with an X-Pro camera like that. And so, yeah, I'm not gonna continue blabbering on the X-Pro2 for too much longer. I think this video is plenty long already. But yeah, I'm really happy with the X-Pro2. Maybe I'll do another video about it, talking about the ergonomics differences and the accessories that I've bought, like this thumb rest or this leather case that I got. This is a camera that I plan on keeping a very, very long time, so I'm not putting myself into any kind of pressure when it comes to putting out content with the X-Pro2. I have plenty of time to do that. Even if I do that in still like 5 years' time, I'm going to be happy. So that's about it for the X-Pro2. You might have noticed, I'm just going to leave a message for the end of this video for the rest of the year. You might have noticed that I haven't been publishing videos in January, and that wasn't intentional, I must say. I have been quite busy with work, and I got sick at some point. I wanted to record something around the 15th of January, but this is where I was like completely in my bed, recovering. So I'm not gonna say that it was intentional, but I mean, I guess that made me take a little bit of a break, and that made me reflect on my photography and the way I want to do videos. So first of all, I took the resolution. I would say that I have way too many cameras right now. I have, I would say, like 3, 4, 5 cameras that I haven't even talked about on this channel. I would want to talk about. Typically a Nikon D7000 or a Lumix G3. Those are cameras that I want to review this year. And I also have a lot of lenses which I love using. I'm quite nerdy about lenses sometimes, but I haven't really made any kind of lens review on this channel, and so I think this is something that I'm going to start doing. So maybe expect some videos just about lenses and not about cameras at all, because I've only been talking about the cameras so far, and I want that to change in 2025. And the last thing I want to say is that I'm trying not to buy any more cameras until the end of the year. I have, as I said, I have way too many cameras already, and I think using what I have before thinking of what could be is more important than simply, chasing the new best thing, or thinking the grass is always greener elsewhere. So yeah, the year 2025 might probably be kind of an interesting year, probably the most interesting year I've had on this channel so far. So stay tuned for that. And all I can say now is take care, stay healthy, and see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. See ya. I'm bad at these things. Damn.